Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of ThinkTank Thursday with TrainerTainment. I'm Candy Kelly, and I'm thrilled to be spending this time with you this week. Thank you for coming. Before we jump into this week's episode, I want to show some love to my 2024 Think Tank sponsors. Thank you to Roller, Simnox, Betson, Delta Strike, BMI Merchandise, Expert Hosiery, Embed. We appreciate their support, which helps us offer you new episodes each week. Now, as you guys know, TrainerTainment likes to take a little bit of time away from the doing on Thursdays and spend some time thinking with some of the industry leading operators, vendors, experts. And today we get to do that with one of our sponsors. So Amber Lambert is joining us from Betson. And this episode is based off of a blog post that she wrote called Unlock the Secret Sauce to Cracking the Code to Employee Retention. And so let's jump in and let Amber, who owned and operated her own family entertainment center, share with us what she learned over the years about employee retention. Amber, thank you for joining me this week on Think Tank Thursday. For those who may not have had the pleasure of meeting you, take a second to introduce yourself and what your role is at Betson.
Hi, I'm Amber Lambert with Betson. So I'm technically a sales rep. I don't look at myself that way. I've had a crazy journey to get here, everything from military police to an auto mechanic. Most people don't know I'm a certified guide for river rafting. So I've done the but I used to be a real estate broker, and in 2008, when the bubble burst, I got into this industry and I fell in love with it. I've been here ever since. And my role, I love helping people make more money in their business. So that's kind of what I look at myself as instead of a sales rep. I operated my own family entertainment center. I worked for a corporate owned family entertainment center. So I've kind of worn all the hats, and that's kind of my journey.
So I had no idea about the river guide either. So you have that's like one of those like key things that you can pull out when it's like, think of something that no one else will know just by looking at you. You have the perfect answer for those icebreakers. This week's Think Tank is focused on a blog that you wrote about the secret sauce to cracking the code to employee retention. And we all know that employee retention is crucial for business success. But you are coming not just from someone like an expert talking, you ran your family entertainment center and have done like the true operational work behind that. And so what are some of the things that you can do, that you think a business can do to attract and hire not just any talent, but the right talent for their business?
Well, I think that the current generation looks at things a little different than us old people do. What motivates them and what motivates us is not the same thing. And so, what I noticed, when I grew up working, it was like, hey, you're going to work because I told you to, and you're going to do this because I told you to, and you were doing it for the paycheck. And that's how it was. And, now there's different motivation. And, when you look at the top things that motivate employees, money is rarely on there. And if you're unhappy, no amount of money is going to replace that. Honestly, finding what motivates people, a lot of people, it's balance in their life, it's having fun at work. And for the younger generation, they really want to make a difference. So, when you're running your business, explaining to them the why, I think is super important. Like, hey, we're not just doing this to make a profit. We're doing this to give experiences. It's that kid that gets to ride the bumper cars for the first time and drive, and that smile on his face, and getting them to understand the deeper meaning behind what they're doing. And it's not just, hey, you're just working a minimum wage job and kind of, discounting
Filling time,
the importance of what they're doing.
At TrainerTainment, we talk a lot about core values. It's part of our business pro system that we go in with businesses help. And I'm always surprised at how many people still don't have core values, because with this younger generation that you're referring to, it's expected for you to have core values. Like, that's not a novelty to them anymore. And so it's expected that you have some core values, but beyond that, it's expected that you live to them. So I actually have a couple of clients that like sometimes close for a day and they go work for Habitat for Humanity, and they have a lot not a whole lot of turnover because of that, like give back to the community that comes in. And it's funny how the journeys have changed, because there was, before 2008, it was all like work. You were loyal to a job forever. You did not like leave a whole lot of times. The number of careers that a person had was like 5 maybe in their entire lifetime. That number is in double digits now. It's like a person that is coming up, the newest generation, is expected to have like 15 different positions in their lifetime, which is totally different than what we knew beforehand.
Yeah, one of the centers that I managed, was kind of brought in to clean house a little bit. And
Mhm.
so it was a, pretty stressful environment from the get-go. I wasn't very welcomed by the staff. And, honestly, there was, my impression of them was just, oh, they were always complaining. And it was just, I was like, they don't know what hard is. And so finally I threw my hands up and I was like, all right, we're all going down to the shelter and we're going to, feed the homeless. And it was like I switched a light bulb in their head and they looked at me as human. And all of a sudden, like everything started changing. And it was, I just took a different approach and it changed like everything. So
I love that story. I love that you were able to look outside the box to find something to reach them, because that's what we have. When we look at this industry, there are a lot of legacy locations out there, places that were started by someone's parents and have dropped down through the generations. So we have baby boomers, we have Gen X, we have millennials, we have Gen Z, and the upcoming, whatever they're calling them, alpha or whatever next. They're all working together in this industry. And I always laugh because people still use the term millennials, but I'm a millennial. Like, we are in leadership positions, we are in those management positions and all that. And so what we're coming up next is like the Gen Zs and Gen Alphas, but all of them have different priorities and expectations in the workplace. So how do you suggest that people kind of adjust their culture to like bring cohesion between the different needs from those different generations?
I would say listen more than you talk, know your employees. Not, even though we were always talking about the different generations, everybody's still an individual. So, you and I may be close to the same age or not, and we may have different things that drive us and motivate us. So, and sometimes you have to communicate that with your boss, but the young people don't know that. So like, in my current job, I tell my boss, hey, I'm motivated by money and winning. Like, I love to win. So you could dangle a carrot and say, hey, if you get this, you'll win a pizza party. I'm in. I want to win.
Got
Like,
a little bit of a competitive streak there, huh?
I don't care if it's a trinket. I don't care what I'm competing for. It doesn't, hey, a lollipop. I want to win. But not everybody is motivated by that. So you get to know your employees and find their strengths. Don't treat other people the way you were treated. I hear so many people, especially the older generation, oh, when I was growing up, or, I was like, that's, you're just perpetuating maybe a bad culture that you had to survive. So that's not the way to do it. When my employees got hired, I'd have them fill out a questionnaire. And it had a ton of different questions, like, what's your favorite coffee? What's your favorite candy bar? And so every once in a while, you pull that out, because I can't remember 30 different people's favorite candy bar, but you pull it out a year later and you go bring them their favorite candy bar. They think the world. It did cost you $1, but it was just that you thought of them in a way that, most people don't.
Kindred spirits. I did the same thing when I was in operations. It was part of their hiring paperwork. It was like a favorites questionnaire. I still use it today as a mom for teachers at the beginning of the school year, so that I can get them teacher appreciation gifts throughout the year that are back to because it says that I care about you enough to make a personalized approach. Some of my employees didn't have a car, so giving them a gas card didn't matter to them. And some of my employees loved their car, and the thing they wanted most was a gas card so that they could go do things. And so knowing the differences between them, always, but that hasn't really changed. Like these kids these days, you can go back 10 years and they were saying it. You can go back 20 years and they were saying it. You can go back 50 years and they were saying these kids these days don't know how to work. They say the same thing. And then I'm always, is it up to us as leaders to adjust, or is it up to the kids to adjust? And that's an interesting thing, because they are our future. And somewhere you've got to meet people where they are, especially if you're in the role of leadership.
Well, it's like speaking a different language, right? You have to speak their language or they don't
Mhm.
understand what you're saying.
I know a great story about that. Beth and I have had this talk all the time about like cell phone usage and how like in sales, you're in sales, so you know that text messaging is a way of communication and has been for a while now. But my brother, I actually have a brother who's 14 years younger than I am, so we're like two different generations. And we were talking about the difference between calling someone and texting, and he's like, "Oh, it's so rude if you just call somebody. Like, who am I to assume that they are ready to talk to me right then because I decided to pick up the phone?" He's like, "I'm always going to text somebody first and make sure that they're clear before I ever call them." And when I told Beth that story, that was like mind blown for her because she's of a different generation where you always just call people first, and texting is a more personal, like, you know, invasion. And so just the flip of how that is seen in different generations is a good example of what you're talking about there.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so so that's when they using their favorite things. What are some other ways that you learned in operating your center for boosting employee morale that doesn't really require monetary incentives?
I think I taught them the why. That was the biggest thing. Taught them why we were doing that. But I also tried to get buy-in from them to feel like they were part of the team, part of the ownership. So, I used to have these staff meetings and we would sit around and I would tell them, I would come up with the agenda and they were not, paying attention. They were, it was like I was just fighting against, so, again, it was one of those moments that I just gave up. I threw my hands in the air and I was like, all right, you run the next meeting. And so I picked somebody and they ran it. And I was like, all right, let's take it to the next. And you guys start picking what the rules are, instead of me telling you, hey, we're not going to have, piercings or you're not going to wear a mohawk. I was like, you guys come up with the rules. And so they came up with the rules and then they started enforcing them and they were stricter on themselves than I ever was. And they started buying in and looking at it as part of their business. And it just, again, was one of those moments that I was just so frustrated that I gave up and it turned out really well. I had one employee at one point because I was like, you have to be clean cut and you have to have, and he said, well, why can't I have a mohawk if we sell mohawks in redemption? And I was like, that's actually a really good point. Like, it's a fun thing. Like, why couldn't you? So, I let him, he had, a blue mohawk and he took pictures with another little kid that came in with a blue mohawk. And it was, it just became like a fun thing. And I was like, why was I stuck in that old mindset, I'd say get your hands dirty. So we used to play a game called bathroom tag, and you could tag anybody to clean the bathrooms, including me as the owner. You couldn't tag the same person that tagged you, but they love tagging the GM or the owner, and we would go in there and get our hands dirty, and it showed that we were one of them. So it was just a simple thing to to just be part of the team. I never wore a different shirt than they did. I wore the same uniform that I expected my employees to wear. It was also great because you could go undercover and nobody knew you were the boss. But
in franchising, I had a franchisee who loved wearing just the normal employee, and she would just have like a normal name tag. And she'd be like, sometimes people will complain and be like, I need to speak to the owner. And she'll be like, I'll take a message and make sure that they get that.
Yeah. Can I speak to your manager? Sure. Let me go get him. Like, I don't want to talk to you. Yeah. And I mean, it was crazy. I would hear people tell stories about, oh, the ownership group of this place. Like, they had no idea I was the owner. I was, undercover boss. It was fun. But I loved getting, I loved tossing pizza and getting behind the redemption counter and, playing with my employees and, showing them that it can be fun. So, find out what motivates each person, get like a brag board. We have that at Betson. It's awesome. We have like an electronic kind of social media board where you can call out other people and say, hey, this other employee did good, and give them some like bonus points. It's great when somebody calls you out. Like it's motivating. I love it. So even at my age, I like that. So
what you did, Amber, is something that I think a lot of people would almost shy away from, is that you threw complete faith into your employees to let them run meetings. So how How hard was that for you to do? It sounds like you did it out of a moment of frustration and had no idea what the positive results would be, but how hard was that for you to do? And then how did you keep them in line with your bigger vision, your bigger goals, your bigger expectations for the business while allowing them to have this freedom to like hold each other more accountable?
Well, I think it's like raising children, right? Like at some point you have to let them go and just assume that you've done a good job of teaching them what that vision is. So, if you've taught them, hey, this is our core why we're here and what we're doing, having that faith to say, you know what, let's just see what you come up with. I mean, and honestly, I find like sometimes it's harder as a female to do that because we tend to be a little more controlling. It's like when your husband does the dishes and you're like, that's not the right way. Well, he did it, right? Like, like you want it done your way. So sometimes you just gotta let them do it their way, step back, and then at the end you can, debrief and say, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something different. But to give them the opportunity to try and succeed or try and fail is just important in their growth and your growth.
We learn more from failures than we do successes always. That's for sure. Um, and so I imagine looking back at your opportunities that you cultivated some decent leaders through this practice that you have of coaching and rising people up. How did you see them turn that to the people who then they maybe led afterwards? Did you see it carry it on? Did you have to coach them up in that? Like, how was that transition for your family entertainment center?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always coaching, but when they took the leadership, then they just the cream rises to the top, and they would it really took a lot off my plate, and it took a lot of learning to get to that point. I remember when I first opened my fun center, I was like mopping the floor and watching, and then I looked up and all my employees were watching me. And I was like, why am I doing this? Like, what like I need to teach them how to do this, and I need to focus on working on my business instead of in my business as much. And that's hard. It's hard to let go as an owner and just to, be like, okay, I'm going to have some faith. But, I mean, it's not blind faith. You still have to debrief, and you still have to follow up, and you still have to make sure it's going the way you want it to go. But, you never want to put somebody down or make them feel bad for making a mistake. And that's, it's okay to fail and learn.
I'm totally going off script on you here, Amber, because I'm fascinated here. So what I find is that people have good employees, and they then promote good employees, and then forget about giving them the skills that make them, or coaching them on the skills that make them good leaders. And those are different things. Like I can be an excellent ride operator, an excellent concession stand worker, but may lack the skills of coaching and leading someone other me once you give me a promotion to like a management role. What soft skills did you find yourself kind of coaching the most, and how did you incorporate that into the operations of the business?
Well, I think mostly what we're talking about here is coaching people on not being a boss, but being a leader. And sometimes being a leader is being a servant leader, and you don't look at yourself as being on top, but you're serving them. You're working for them because they're working for your customer. So, everybody has the pyramid the wrong way, right? The customer is the important one. Not the boss. You can survive without the boss. You can't survive without the customer.
I love that. I used to, and when my background comes in franchising, which I think and so people who bought into our franchise would come, and I would train them on how. And one of the things I always said in like the training classes when we were opening is that the person who owns this franchise may sign that check, but you are actually working for the guests that come in the door, because the moment they stop coming in the door, there are no more funds to sign on a check. Like those funds don't exist. And so we don't work for that. We work for the people who are coming in our doors, and they are the most important person in our existence when we're here. And so I have never heard it said the pyramid's backwards, though. That's I like that. So in your experience, what are like what are the biggest improvements that you think as you're traveling? I'm sure you're traveling to locations and you go to shows and you hear operators talk. What are some of the improvements that you see that you would like to see a trend of being made to hang on to employee retention and morale, which we both know then and would all in turn enhance customer satisfaction and customer loyalty? What trends would you like to see continue or you think should be coming up?
I think, as owners and managers, I think we need to look more to our employees for what they're good at. Look at their skill set, because, a lot of times we're, so busy that we don't realize we have somebody that's, taking classes for photography, or that's learning social media, or, I mean, these kids are super talented, and, because they come in chewing gum and not necessarily the way we would assume that you should come into an interview process. Sometimes we judge it, and sometimes, if you're a good leader, you should be able to coach anybody, honestly. Like, I've got a kid in softball, and we just played this team that was just crushing everybody. And I was wondering, I was like, did they coach those kids up, or did they just recruit the best kids? Right. So if you're a good coach, you should be able to take a bad player and teach them how to play, right? Like, so it's the same way in business, maybe it's not so much just hiring the best people, but maybe it lands on you as an owner or a manager to, teach that bad employee how to be a good employee.
I'm sure if we ask plenty of owners over the time who have been in owning for a while, there's probably an employee that we all made a judgment on when we hired or saw that they were hired by someone that then turned around and surprised the heck out of us by being an amazing employee. I can think of one in Wisconsin now. He was a guy, he seemed so lackadaisical throughout the entire orientation process. But once we put him on the floor, he was the one that would truly play with kids and engage. And so it would come to the point that an entire group of kids would be interacting and playing with him. And he was like a superstar. But those initial first judgments, if we had not, if we had let them get the best of us, we would have missed that experience that he provided to all of those kids.
You know what I found in doing, I did those group interviews, and, whoever our top pick was rarely ended up being like the best employee, honestly. Like, it's just like in the NFL, right? The top, quarterbacks, yeah, they don't do anything. It's always the underdog that comes through and kind of challenges you and makes you see things a little different. So yeah, I think sometimes, we got to be a little less quick to judge, and a little more putting it on ourselves to make that person, who they could be.
And I will challenge everybody to quit saying kids these days. I have a brother that's 14 years younger than I. I have a 12-year-old, I'm a 6-year-old, and I have friends that have kids that are graduating. I actually think they're probably some of the hardest working people out there, because the risk, they are volunteering their time. They have multiple jobs a lot of times, or multiple academic, whether it's clubs or sports or something, because in today's world, to get into some higher education, you can't just have a good GPA anymore. And so there's all of these things. They just might not have the same working for someone else ethic that you may have had growing up, or the generations before had. They don't live to work, they work to live. And that's just a different mentality. And people complained about you and said kids these days when you were going into the workforce, and people complained about your parents too. It has been the thing that has been going on for generations.
Well, I think, just having, especially as a leader, having humility is important, and being like, hey, I don't know everything. And, my kids teach me stuff every day, and not just slang. Like, I learn real life lessons from them because I'm open to learning from them. And I don't assume that just because I'm older, I know everything. And, just how much could you learn if you just opened your mind a little bit?
I think that's a great place to wrap this up. Amber, we have a signature question for anyone who comes on Think Tank, and it's your first time on my Think Tank, so I'm very excited about this one. So the question is, TrainerTainment's obsessed with growth, and that's what we focus all of our business practices on. So what are you doing right now on a consistent basis to grow yourself?
So I seek out mentorship. So I need somebody to hold me accountable for my goals. So I reached out to some leadership in our organization and asked for them to mentor me. So that's something I do. I try to read, but I'm busy. I just try to learn from everybody I meet. So I assume everybody out there has a lesson to teach me, even if it's through failure or whatever. And just try to keep an open mind to learn new stuff.
Awesome. And the last but most important question, if people are intrigued by what they hear, where can they connect with you and where can they learn more about you or Betson?
Oh, everywhere. We're everywhere. We're on all the socials, LinkedIn, Facebook. Call me, text me, send me a carrier pigeon. Anything is fine. I will answer. I love making new friends in the industry. And Betson.com.
Awesome. Well, Amber, thank you again for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, I want to thank Amber for her time today. I learned so much, and it was such great to hear about her experiences with employees and how she chose coaching as her mode of operation rather than managing. Such a great story there. So again, let me thank her for her time. Thank again to my 2024 digital sponsors, which is inclusive of Betson. And then as a reminder, if you have a Think Tank idea, if you want to be a guest on Think Tank, or you would like to sponsor an episode of Think Tank, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find me, Candy, at TrainerTainment.net. And then also be sure to check out where you can connect with TrainerTainment in real life. All of our upcoming events and appearances can be found at TrainerTainment.net under our events menu. So again, thank you for tuning in today for TrainerTainment's Think Tank Thursday. Remember that the journey to success is all about growth. And here at TrainerTainment, we are committed to helping you and your company thrive. Visit TrainerTainment.net to learn more about how we can support your growth journey. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep being awesome. Bye, guys.